Welcome to My Stable Relationship, an equestrian performance podcast where we will deep dive into the mindset and management challenges of ourselves and of our peers. Our discussions will allow you to learn from experts, encourage you to set audacious goals, overcome challenges, and develop actionable plans. Ready? Let's do this. Hello everyone, and welcome back to My Stable Relationship. As a reminder, before we get started, for the month of July, I am giving away 25 free introductory performance coaching sessions. These sessions are perfect for any equestrian who has ever thought about performance, mindset, or life coaching. Come with a topic or just come as you are, and we will find our own way in the session just with our discussion. The booking link can be found in the podcast show notes or in my social media bios at Journey of Equine. Quick update from this week. I spoke in one of the last episodes about wanting to start a blog so that I can really track my horse's rehabilitation progress and so that I can show you how I make changes and how I run experiments or how I use trial and error with them. And I use trial and error for everything. So I use it for their training, their feeding, their shoeing, paddock design, everything. I also work really closely with my amazing team of healthcare providers. So that could be my vets, nutritionists, my farrier, body workers, everyone. And they all really help me with the trial and error process. So it's this really cool system that I've got going with the horses at the moment. And I've actually already started putting some articles up. I'm in the middle of changing the horses' diets from a performance horse diet to one that better supports equine Cushing's and insulin resistance, and to one that is better suited for hoof rehabilitation and hoof growth. And that's mostly because Rhythm is 26 years old, and last year he started showing some signs of a metabolic syndrome. And then I want to start some fairly serious hoof rehabilitation on Bo and Joe. So Bo, because he's had a navicular diagnosis since 2014 now, and we're always playing and tweaking his hoof care. And Joe, because his last x-rays in March showed us that his hind feet were at a really low palmar angle. So not negative, but just needing attention. So I've been working with an independent nutritionist to help me rebalance their diets to support the rehabilitation goals that I now have instead of that performance horse competition goal. And I've got things like that up on the blog already. You can also check out my property that we're about to create a Paddock Paradise track system on. I'll be putting up some slow motion footage of their hoof landings as they walk, and all sorts of cool things are on their way. So you can check out the blog and follow along, and maybe some of what I do will be relevant and helpful for you to repeat with your own horse. So the blog is at www.journeyofequine.com.au/blog, but I'll put the link in the show notes for you. So today's topic is about not failing ahead of time. And I want to start with what failing actually means. The dictionary definition of the word fail means that you were unsuccessful in achieving your goal, or that you fell short of achievement in something expected, attempted, or desired. And these are both kind of saying the same thing. When we don't meet our expectations, we consider it a failure. But I would like to offer you an extended definition. So the surface level definition of failing is falling short of achieving your goals. And that's a really black or white way of looking at it. It's like a win or lose scenario, but it's also a bit misguided and a little bit victim-minded. The deeper way of looking at it is that falling short of achieving your goals is only a failure if you define it as a failure. Remember from a few episodes ago, I said that our thoughts and our feelings about our circumstances define the meaning of that circumstance. So remember our example of two show jumpers. Both of them go to the same show, they jump the same round, and they both knock a rail. One rider walks away defining the round as a complete failure. Yet the other one sees it as a great learning opportunity and a growing opportunity. Their thoughts and feelings about the circumstance gave meaning to the circumstance. Or another example is in rehabilitation. Let's say there's two horses who have both had a type of navicular diagnosis. One owner might feel really resentful, like their competitive career is over and they just want to quit, while the other might have thoughts about being able to nurse the horse back to health and thoughts that empower them to overcome the next challenge. Same thing, each owner's thoughts and feelings about this circumstance, and the circumstance is the navicular diagnosis, each owner's thoughts and feelings about the circumstance gave meaning to that circumstance. So, what happens in the case of failing is that the circumstance is that you haven't met your goals or achieved what you had hoped. And then the next steps are that you have a thought about it, and that thought creates a feeling in your body. And it is those thoughts and feelings that determine whether or not the circumstance is classified as a failure or what that circumstance actually means. So, whether you failed or not is actually caused by a combination of your thoughts and feelings rather than caused by the circumstance. And I love quotes. Michelle Obama, in her book Becoming, has a really beautiful quote that says, "Failure is a feeling long before it becomes an actual result. It's vulnerability that breeds with self-doubt and then is escalated, often deliberately, by fear." I'll say that one more time. Failure is a feeling long before it becomes an actual result. It's vulnerability that breeds with self-doubt and then is escalated, often deliberately, by fear. So if failure is a feeling, or if defining something as a failure is caused by your thoughts and feelings about a circumstance, then what does it mean to fail ahead of time? And I want you to just listen really carefully to these next few sentences. So come back to me and just think about if any of these sentences sound familiar to you. I don't know if I can do it. I've never done it before. What will people think? I'm going to wait and see what happens. I'm waiting until I'm ready. Things like this don't usually work out for me. It's probably not going to happen, so why bother? I just can't take the risk. And let me give you those again, but in a horsey sense now. I don't know if I can ride that young horse yet. I've never ridden a cross-country course before. What will people think if I swap from show jumping to classical dressage? I'm going to wait and see what happens at our next farrier visit. I don't usually place very well in the show ring anyway. I'm probably not going to place, so why bother? He's probably going to speak on the trail, so why bother? Do any of those hit home for you? I know they do for me. Sentences like this often appear to be really valid reasons in our minds for not making a change, for not being vulnerable, or for not believing something is possible. We've also been trained in our culture to use types of sentences like this. And I bet you can think of a million times where your family, your equestrian friends, your coaches, your farriers, your barn owners, whoever, they have offered you advice. Sentences like, don't get too far ahead of yourself. Maybe just keep him in the round yard for today. The arena is probably a step too much. Are you really going out on a trail ride by yourself? Why would you do groundwork at a dressage barn? Your quarter horse isn't really bred for show jumping. That pony isn't really cut out for dressage. He's a thoroughbred. He can't go barefoot. And although often this comes from a good place and people think that they're offering you really helpful advice, trying to keep you safe, sentences like these highlight the fear, and it's a collective fear that our societies have, where we are so worried that we might fail if we were to try something. Yet the irony is that you failed anyway by not trying, by not going after what might be possible. You are not going to reach your goals by not trying, so you end up failing ahead of time. When you tell yourself or you let others tell you that it's too hard, too confusing, unknown, or unlikely, you fail before you've even given yourself the slightest opportunity to succeed. You avoid action in order to avoid the associated feeling. You fail ahead of time when you stop yourself from pursuing something or believing in possibilities. When you continually stop yourself from growing and expanding yourself and your life, you will begin to grow resentful of others and of their successes. You fail ahead of time when you convince yourself that you are protecting yourself from some future feeling of disappointment, sadness, or shame. But the truth is that there is a 100% chance that you will feel disappointment, sadness, or shame if you fail ahead of time because you never even tried. And if you do get started, yes, there's still a chance of disappointment, sadness, or shame, but you actually don't know how far you might get. It's interesting, isn't it? Let's run through that again, but with some examples. Let's say you have a quarter horse that you'd like to do dressage with, but people have told you that your horse isn't bred for dressage. If you never get started, if you decide that those people are right, then you've failed ahead of time. 100% fail rate. But if you decide to try anyway, you might go and find a local dressage trainer, you might get some lessons, you might start going to some small competitions. All of a sudden, you will find yourself so much further along the path towards your goal. And I'm not saying that there won't be some moments along the way where you will feel like you are failing, but you are 1,000 times better off and ahead of where you would be if you had just failed ahead of time. Another one, let's say you've been dreaming of doing a trail ride in the mountains with your own horse, but you're worried that your horse is too old, too slow, too spooky, whatever. Failing ahead of time would look like not trying and not going after what you want. And if you do that in this example, I 100% guarantee that you will never be able to trail ride in the mountains with your horse. However, if you were to convince yourself to try, you might start testing out some short trail rides with friends. You might ride a little bit more often to build up fitness. You might buy some new hoof boots. You might join some groups to learn more about trail riding, anything. And in the case that you get started and you just try, I guarantee you that you will find yourself further along the path to your goal. And again, I'm not saying that there won't be some moments along the way where you won't have setbacks or feel like you're failing, but you will be 1,000 times better off and ahead of where you would be if you had just failed ahead of time. Now, let's talk about your brains, because I think some of you might be thinking, yeah, but I would know if I was failing ahead of time. And I want to let you know that failing ahead of time is a super sneaky way of your brain avoiding being uncomfortable. It is much easier for your brain to just think and theorize about things rather than get out there and take action. It's also a great way of our brain keeping us safe, because doing something new or unfamiliar often seems unconsciously dangerous. And also, remember last episode we discussed whether or not you are stuck in your own story? Well, if we are saying those types of thoughts over and over to ourselves, things like, I've never done it before, and I'll wait till I'm ready, our brain starts to formulate these into part of our story. And then we start to believe, or we start to feel really deeply that these are the truth, a fact, rather than recognizing them as our thoughts and our feelings. So we get stuck by our own brain and our own story, and we fail ahead of time. The other reason that our brain lets us fail ahead of time is that often when we fail ahead of time, we fail quietly. And I hope this really hits home for you, because it's really quite a sad state to live our lives in, where we fail ahead of time. We fail quietly. So this means that nearly nobody else knows. And on the surface, our brain likes that a lot better, because we haven't had to risk feeling uncomfortable or ashamed or embarrassed or judged. But the summary is, whether it's intentional or not, we fail ahead of time so that we don't have to feel a negative emotion. That's it. That's the only reason. We fail ahead of time so that we don't have to feel a negative emotion. There are a few different types of failing ahead of time that I want you to be aware of. The first is self-rejection. This is when you've decided ahead of time that you know what someone else is going to say or do or feel about you. For example, you've decided that you probably won't place in the hunter class, and therefore you don't enter. You've decided that the clinician probably doesn't like thoroughbreds, so you wouldn't bother signing up for the weekend training anyway. You've decided that you're likely to be vetted out of the endurance race anyway, and therefore you don't start. As a non-horsey example, I used to see this all the time with my career and corporate coaching clients. where they would decide whether or not they were a good fit for a role ahead of even making it to an interview so that they could speak to the future employers. You fail ahead of time when you self-reject. And it sounds terrible what I'm about to say, but you will get further towards your goal if you just leave it to others to do the rejecting. Do not self-reject. The second type of failing ahead of time is if you've assumed something. And this is quite similar to self-rejecting, except that there's no judge or coach or interviewers or other human parties involved. So you are assuming something about a future circumstance. It's like fortune telling, right? You have assumed that your horse won't like the beach, and so you don't go on a riding club trip. You have assumed that your horse will spook at the water jump, and so instead of trying the jump, you ride around it. You have based your decision not to start or whether or not to do something on an assumption that you have made. Something that you don't actually know for sure, and you could never know for sure, but you failed ahead of time. And the third type of failing ahead of time is being stuck in a loop of preparing and practicing. And this is the one that I really have to watch out for myself. Don't get me wrong, preparing and practicing are absolutely important. Like, please do not go and jump the next level of jumps at a competition, having never trained at that height before. But you know as well as I do that we can get caught in a loop of waiting until we can do something perfectly, until we can move forward. And this type of perfectionism, this type of preparing and practicing is causing you to fail ahead of time. So I'm going to throw out some other reasons that you might fail ahead of time or types of failing ahead of time. And I just want to see if any of them resonate with you. And I'm not calling any of you out. I just think that this is really useful to start to identify where your specific block might be. So perhaps you care too much about what other people think. Maybe you're afraid of the shame and the judgment more than you're afraid of actually not reaching the goal. Perhaps you've refused to try. Perhaps you want the outcome more than you want to obtain the skill. Perhaps you are more inclined to throw in the towel and give up entirely than to trial and error and change course. Perhaps you think you don't have the discipline to stick with something. Perhaps you give up without ever putting in the effort. Perhaps you get distracted easily. Perhaps you don't believe in yourself. What I want to end with is by showing you that there's no upside to failing ahead of time. There is only an upside to trying first, to taking the risk first. And I think you've already seen from this episode and from the examples that there is no upside to failing ahead of time. But what I want to tell you is that you either fail ahead of time, where you miss the opportunity to learn and grow along the way, and you will likely feel negative emotions, or you actually try and you will get further towards your goals, guaranteed, even if you still feel some negative emotion or experience the bumps in the road. Only if you try, only if you take the risk and take action, will there be more positive emotion, because it might just work out. So getting what we want actually means we need to take that action. Don't let yourself fail ahead of time. So let's chat about the actionable step for today. To stop failing ahead of time, you need to change the story that you're telling yourself. And good news, this links in with last week's episode. The first thing that I want to remind you is that you create the associated emotions. You create both your positive and your negative emotions with your thoughts. So, whichever path you choose, just know that how you think and feel will dictate what you do or don't do. So to change your story over time, we need to start changing the thoughts which have become like the building blocks of your story. And we can do this by creating a slight shift in your thinking. So by picking one common thought, a thought that you use really often, and by caveating it with the words maybe, yet, or it's possible. So let me give you an example. You are going to change your thought from, let's say my thought is, it's not going to happen. We're going to change it to, it is possible that it could happen, or to, maybe it will happen, or to, it hasn't happened yet. And here's the deal. By caveating those sentences, we've made them feel a lot lighter, a lot more open, and they have a sense of curiosity or of hope around them. And all of a sudden, possibilities will open up for you. It's also very likely that all of those thoughts will feel true to you because there's not much difference between them. So there's not much difference between it's not going to happen or it's not going to happen yet. But it does make sense to choose the one that opens you up to more opportunities, possibilities, and that best serves you in reaching your goals. So it's this slightest shift in thinking that will make all the difference. So all I want you to do this week is pick a common thought, a thought that you use really often, and caveat it with the words maybe, yet, or it's possible. And let me know in the DMs what thought you've chosen and how you have opened it up to more possibility and opportunity. My goal with this podcast is to use this type of mindset and management work to help you more effectively rehabilitate or train your horse. We will balance your life inside and outside of the arena so that you can find your version of a stable relationship. And as a reminder, for the month of July, I am giving away 25 free introductory performance coaching sessions. These sessions are perfect for any equestrian who has ever thought about performance, mindset, or life coaching. Come with a topic or just come as you are, and we will find our way in the session. The booking link can be found in the podcast show notes or in my social media bios at Journey of Equine. I have super loved meeting everyone who has signed up so far, so thank you. And again, there are only a few slots left for July, but if any of them don't suit your current time zone, can you just send me a DM on Instagram or Facebook? And if there are still some slots available, we can work together to find one that suits us both. And with that, I just want to say thank you for tuning in today. Please subscribe to the podcast on whichever platform you're listening on so that you don't miss any of the future episodes. You can also follow along on the socials at Journey of Equine. The links are in the show notes. Have a wonderful week, everyone. I'll speak to you soon. Thank you so much for listening. My goal is to help you more effectively train or rehabilitate your horse by focusing on your mindset and management, both inside and outside of the arena. If this sounds like something you'd like one-on-one help with, or if you'd like to follow along for more, come and join me on Instagram or Facebook at Journey of Equine. The links will be in the show notes. Have a great week, everyone.